In this video, we are going to split our item SO into an edible item and later on into a equipable item, and we are going to create out of this a new apple item that we can eat or consume, and this will provide the stat modifier, food health modifier that will modify the health of our character upon being consumed. Okay, let's get going. Okay, currently our items, so in our model we have our item SO, and this is a single class representing all the items in our game. What I would like to do is to create some subclasses of this and make this into an abstract class, because what I know so far is that my game would require me to have some sort of, let me find the data, some sort of an apple that restores the health as well as the sword. Sword can be equipped and de-equipped, and the apple can be eaten to restore the health. Most of the items in our game will be like this. So we have equipable item, we have edible item. So the easiest way to go about it is to simplify our system, to constrain our system that one item can be either edible or equipable, and we are going to create a subclass of our item SO. So we are going to start by selecting our scripts, our model folder. Let's right click here, create, and we are going to create a new C# script. Let's call it food item SO, or maybe we can call it simply edible item. Edible item SO, and this will be one of our new scripts. So let's create the next one. So we are going to right click, create a new C# script, and we are going to call it equipable item SO. And those will be our two items that we have in our game. And of course, since they will have a common superclass, so item SO, we are going to make sure that this is the hierarchy is wide rather than deep, making sure that we can easily extend this item by creating a new item like the common item, so something that is just for the sake of selling it to a merchant or whatever we want to have. Okay, so let's start with the edible item SO. Let's open this script up. Okay, let's delete the start and update. I wanted to inherit from item SO. Okay, and we need to put this inside the namespace. So right click, quick actions, and move to namespace, and we are going to move it to our inventory dot model, because that's where our item SO lives. Okay. Now I know that some items in our inventory need to be destroyable, so we want to be able to remove them from our inventory. Well, maybe the quest items should not be removable or destroyable, so that we should not be able to destroy them from our game. We may want to move it to some container, but not destroy. So we are going to create an interface, public interface. Let's maybe call it IDestroyableItem. And this is it. This will be the empty interface, and we are going to just use its type to define this functionality. So every class that implements this IDestroyableItem will show the action called destroy. When we right click on the item, we are going to see destroy option to remove this item from our inventory. Now another thing that we may want to do is we may want to have the common interface for the ITEMAction. So let's create it in the same class. We may want to extract it later. We're going to have a public interface IItemAction. So let's create a new interface, and we are going to call this public interface IItemAction. So each item action needs to have a public string action name. This is just for the sake of being able to display the correct name inside the inventory UI to show the action name so that we know what it is. We are also going to expect an audio clip so that we can provide some feedback to this action, although this isn't necessary for this interface, because maybe we want to split the feedback functionality from the just the logic of how our item works. And we are going to have a bool perform action that will take in game object character so that we can find the components that we need to use to perform this action. For example, if we want to have an edible item, we may want this action to be restore health, and then we are going to simply find the health object on our agent, and we are going to try to use it to restore the health. So this is the idea here. Sorry that I haven't prepared any UML diagram to show this. So basically we are going to extend this inside our edible item, so IItemAction, and we are going to right click on this quick actions and implement interface, and we will have those parameters here. Now as the action name, we are going to simply return eat or consume. Okay. Now as the public audio clip action SFX, we are going to create get and private set so that we can only set it through the inspector. So we need to delete the lambda expression. We may want to have it as a set so that we can set it up from the saved data or from the database that we have. Now the perform action is a bit tricky to implement in a generic way, because what does it mean that the item is edible? Well, it can restore health, but it can restore also mana, or it can increase the strength of your character, or it can decrease something else. So there are a lot of possibilities to what we want to influence through eating this edible item. So before we can finish implementing this, let's go back to Unity, and we are going to create inside our model, right click, create a folder. We are going to call it Item Modifiers, and we are going to right click, create here a new C# script. Let's call it character stat modifier, and let's maybe add SO because this will be a scriptable object. Okay, when you open this script app, we are going to delete the start and update. We are going to make this into an abstract class, and it will extend not mono behavior but scriptable object. Okay. Now one thing that we need to provide here is the method public abstract void affect character. We are going to get the game object character so that we can access any component that we want to modify, like the character stats or the health component. But we also need to pass the value which we want to modify. We can have health modifier that will find the character's health value and will modify it by this value of a float. Now, we do not have a luxury of selecting what type of value do we want to have here, because I want to keep it as generic as possible so we can reuse it in different ways. So that float value will provide will correspond to int. So for health maybe we want to have 1, 2 and so on. So we are going to provide an int here, but this will take a float value. For other things that we may want to provide the value between 0 and 1, and we cannot really constrain this value here. So this may be a cause of bugs in our code, but basically this is the only way that we can make this code reusable. Float value can represent basically anything. Now let's save this and let's select our edible item as again. So I know that my edible item will need to use this character stat modifier. We are going to create some variables of this, but basically all we need to do is have an abstract version of this. So let me create below all the definitions of the interfaces. We're going to have a serializable public class modifier data. Now for this serializable attribute to work, we need to right click on its quick action and say using system. So we are going to be able to serialize it inside the inspector. This will take in public character stat modifier and the public float value so that we can assign it inside the inspector. Now, as we have already created this affect character method, this will take in character and the float value. So we are going to use this float value here inside this class modifier data. This float value will be passed to the stat modifier to perform the modifications. So now, we can define all sorts of modifiers. So now all we need to do is slide up to find the edible item SO definition, and we need to create a list of modifiers. So serialized field private list of modifier data, modifiers data, new list of modifier data. Basically, this will be the list of modifiers that we want to apply by eating this item. So inside this perform action, all we will have is a for each loop for each modifier data inside modifiers data, and we are going to call data stat modifier affect character, because stat modifier is the reference to our character stat modifier scriptable object, and we are going to modify the data about this character that we have passed here, and we're going to pass data value to pass the what value should we use to modify our stat or our feature of the character. Again, maybe this seems very vague, but this is how we can ensure that the modifier data can be anything that we want to have to modify the stats of our character. Let's save this and let's go back to our ItemSO. Actually, we want to also add here create asset menu just to be able to create this edible item SO. And let's right click on this item SO, go to the definition, and we are going to make it into an abstract class. We're going to delete the create asset menu because we do not want to create our items but our food item or any other subclass item that we are going to create. Let's save this all, so file and save all. Right now we are not going to be able to test it, but we need to go back to the inspector. Okay, we are not going to see any explicit errors, but in our data folder we are going to see that all of those does not work, so our apple and our sword. So we need to delete the apple and the sword, and we need to go to our player, we need to extend the inventory controller, and we need to set the initial items to 0 because they contain the references to the non-existent items. Now I'm going to go back to our data, right click, create, and we should now have the edible item SO. So let's call it apple. And we need to set it up again, so is stackable true, 99 apples are the max value. We are going to set the name apple and restores health as a description. Okay, let's select the item sprite, let's type loot, and we should have the generic loot 5, which is the apple. And as you can see, we can expand the modifiers data list. So let's create another script. In the scripts model item modifiers, let's right click, create a new C# script. Let's call it character stat health modifier SO. Sorry about the lengthy name. Now let's open this script up. Okay, great. We're going to delete the update and start. We are going to extend the character. We have stat modifier, and we need to right click on this quick actions and implement the abstract method. We are going to also add here create asset menu. So just to finish the logic that I wanted to show you, character stat health modifier will be used by our edible item. This will pass to it the character reference and the data value. So what do we want to do inside the modifier? Well, I know that my character, if we go back to our hierarchy and select player v2, has the health script that can affect the health. So if I go back to my health modifier, what I want to do is find health, and I do admit that here we need to sort of know how to find this item, health. So this isn't straightforward divided from the rest of the code. We still have some dependencies of knowing how to access this. So I'm going to ask character dot get component. I'm going to ask for the health component. So this way I should get the access to the health component. I'm going to check if my health component reference is not null, then I know that I can perform some modifications to it. So I'm going to call health dot add health, since I know that this method exists on my health item, and I'm going to pass as the int, so I'm going to cast it to an int, the value that I have. Now we need to explicitly convert our item, our float value, to whatever is expected by the method that we want to use. So I know that health wants to use the int value, so I need to ensure that I'm going to pass int that is a valid int. Basically, this will be the idea here. We are going to save this, Ctrl S, and let's go back to Unity. Okay. And now we can go to our data, right click, create a new folder, let's call it modifiers. And here we are going to right click, create a new character stat health modifier, and I'm going to call it maybe food health modifier. So I know that my food items will use this to modify the health, to increase the health over time, for example, or just once. So if we consume it, we are going to modify the health. So now I'm going to go back to my data, apple, expand the list, so add one item, expand the element, and inside our apple we are going to select the food health modifier, and I'm going to pass the value here. So let's say that I want to modify 1 health, so I want to add 1 health to my character. And of course, we may want to pass here the negative value to, for example, decrease the health. So for example, we have some potion that decreases the health by some amount but increases strength or whatever we want. So basically, this is the whole idea. Okay, so let's stop here. We have kind of refactored our code. We still need to refactor our weapon item so that we can equip our sword, but we are going to take care of it in the next video. Okay, see you in the next video.